I'm Cortavius. We're talking champion rebalances. I know the content creators put all this stuff out, the big boys, and there's plenty of content out there. I thought it would be helpful. I see comments, that content creators are championing what Plarium wants, and I don't know that they use the champions that get buffed or not. So I thought it would be helpful to get somebody who's not a content creator in any program, and I don't get paid by anybody. So I'm just another player. And what's a perspective of somebody who happens to have Claydna? And when I pulled her, I was pissed. I was really like not happy to pull her. I think she's garbage. And so getting buffed, is fantastic. So I was excited to see what the buff was, and I thought it would be helpful to get my views of is the buff worth making her useful or not. And then I'll cover a little bit of hot corn at the end. I don't own him, but I'll give my views of how I think he does work in a briefer version. So let's get into Claydna. So they did do, I would call it a significant buff of Claydna. They've done what I'll call Fortis and Pixneal buffs in the past, which are useless buffs. Useless. They didn't do anything for those champs in my mind. They've done Tila buffs, which are a pretty good buff that made Tila quite functional, particularly in Hydra. And then they've done what I'll call Draco or Siegfried type buffs where they make a champ, who was really not any good, like Siegfried, who was the worst mythical in the game, laughable, into an incredible nuker. I mean, that guy's crazy. So they do various levels. I would say Claydna is more in the Tila realm than the Fortis Pixneal, but certainly it's not one of the best buffs either. So within the kit, the A1, they did turn this into an 80% sleep, which when booked turns to 100% sleep. So she is Void Affinity, so she won't weak hit in PvE stages or in PvP with that, which is good. But it does take accuracy. You're going to build her with accuracy anyway, so that's for the other skills. So that's not a problem itself. However, it does introduce the 3% chance that it just won't land. So in any content, she might not land at 3% of the time, whereas Siphi has the unresistible sleep on her A1. But it does have to have greater than 50% turn meter on Siphi, so she doesn't have that, so that's a benefit of her over Siphi. But I would take the unresistible over the 50% turn meter thing in a heartbeat. So, doesn't have that strong versus a Siphi, but it's still, 100% sleep at least. Second skill, she already had a decreased speed and a leech that's on a place and has a 20% heal. That's a strong skill. So now they're throwing in that she'll restore 100% of the destroyed max HP as well before she does the heal. So that's fantastic. Restores the HP, then heals, and also does a decreased speed and does a leech on the enemies to be able to provide more healing off the leech. That is a fantastic skill. I'll definitely give him that. And then on the block debuffs, revive on death, she will remove all debuffs first, so she'll do the cleanse, and then she will do the block debuffs and revive on death. And that's on a 3-turn cooldown for 2 turns. So good skill as well. And then the passive gets bumped up. Oh, I'm sorry, no, it's a 60% chance when booked. It will now be on a random ally. So instead of it being on her, it will be on a random ally. It is different than a Sepulchre Sentinel who puts that on the lead, so you can actually target where it goes. With this being a random ally, it does take out the ability to control where it goes. So there's definitely maybe a pro and arena to that, but a con and PvE content to having that change made. So those are the skill changes. Now let's talk about how does that impact where you can use her. I didn't want to just walk through the skills. Let's get practical on the impact. And let's take game area by game area. So Sand Devils would be the first one I would think of. And the Sand Devil boss, there's 3 different approaches you could use in Sand Devils. One is the one-shot speed team. So she would be the speed placer in that. And then you would bring in, say, a double newt on affinity breaker sets and a reset champ and try and take the boss down before the boss can do any damage. Her A1 is perfect for that except the 3% chance. So 3% of your runs on average over time will fail. 11 books into a Lego Void Legendary to have that 3% still. I think that's disappointing. And I know there are endgame teams that build teams with that 3% chance and they just lose the energy. I'm not too excited for that, but that's how she fits in those teams. Revive on Death. There are teams, whether that's Godseeker or Mother Cybele or even herself. She's got the Revive on Death. Those teams with the passive are impossible to build. So the Revive on Death works is you need the team to die. They come back with a controlled amount of turn meter. They keep their turn order so you can build a speed tune. She's going to randomly block somebody from dying, which will throw off the speed tune in probably at least 60% of your runs. So she's just, with the passive, I don't know how they thought about the A3 and the passive being on the same champ and having her be a Sand Devil champ with that. In that comp, she's useless. The third approach is a tanky Geomancer max HP type team where you let champs can die, but you have a double reviver in there that can bring them back, and you just whittle the boss down, maybe a 3-minute run. She works well in that because she can bring sleep, which can help that team, and she also, the passive now doesn't helps those teams because maybe a Geomancer doesn't die as often, and she's got the Revive on Death, so your revivers don't have to use their turns as much. And she only has 1 hit on her kit, so she takes fewer turns out of the Sand Devil boss. So in those teams, she's actually pretty doable. It is interesting to compare her quickly, though, to another Void Legendary, crazy enough, in Chagor. Chagor is used in those teams now. He places poisons through one of his skills, and then he also usually put them on a toxic set, and he puts poisons up. So the boss has poisons. Anytime that boss tries to take a turn, Chagor is going to use his passive to attack the boss, and on his A1, he's got a 25, 70, 80% chance of sniper a chance to sleep. The beauty of that in Sand Devil is every time the boss tries to take a turn, he's trying to put the boss back to sleep. So you don't worry as much about speed, tune, or timing because Chagor is going to try every time. His problem is it's an 80% chance, so he's got 20% chance to miss. Usually he's got about 3 attempts before the boss is going to screw stuff up. Problem is, runs with him will die because 20% chance can actually proc 3 times in a row, fairly, frequently enough that it can ruin the percentages. So she's a little more difficult in that with the A1 being the sleep, you're going to have to be able to control when she uses the A1 versus when the boss is going to have its turn. So how many hits did you put on the shield or on the boss to wake the boss up? And does her A1 time to put the boss back to sleep right? So I think she's a little more difficult to tune than a Chagor who's going to try every time. Boy, would I love this to have a A1 that just says, 80%, 75% chance, so it books to 100 against bosses. I think there's only one boss you can sleep anyway. Why not give him a 75% chance and then he is your 100% Sand Devil sleeper instead of just Siphi be the only one in the game? Why not give that buff to Chagor and make him functional? And he doesn't use it anywhere else then. It's not on waves, it's not in PvP. Just give it against bosses for 75% and Chagor is what you need. So I wish they had done something with her like that, but they didn't. So we don't have that ability in Sand Devil. So what's the verdict then? I think for the speed teams, it's 97% chance. I guess you got to judge if that's good enough for you. It's not for me because I got a team that can do it in 3 minutes and they've never lost in hundreds of fights. I'll take 100% chance for hundreds of fights on a boss. I don't race Sand Devil unless maybe it's CVC, which that could be helpful. So I don't see putting 11 books into her for that. Revive on Death doesn't work. That's garbage. So really it's just, is she helpful in the tank teams? And do you build her as a Void Legendary for that? So I think verdict for me on Sand Devil, I'm probably just disappointed with what she can do versus what they could have done to make her viable. Give the unresistible A1, give her the Chagor type passive, or don't give the passive at all that conflicts with the Revive on Death. Those are probably 3 ways they could have made her viable. So she is doable. She can be used, but not Void Legendary use in Sand Devils in my mind. Sand Devil. So next place, Hydra. For Hydra, her A1's useless. She can't do anything with it. So they really needed to give something on here like Newt, where he has his, if the boss can't have the turn meter reduced, he does a freeze. Okay. Why not give her something like she places Hex or she places Provoke? Doesn't even have to be AoE if it's Provoke, because you only have one head you can provoke, but you got to be able to target him. But something on the A1 that does something in Hydra would have been helpful, because the A1's useless, which it's the only skill she attacks on. So the A2, decreased speed, leech, and restoring the max HP and a heal. That's a fantastic Hydra ability. It doesn't attack, so it will place even through Poison Cloud. That's a great skill. I definitely like that one. And then block debuffs, revive on death. That's a and the cleanse on a 3-turn cooldown. That's also a really good skill if you have a mischief tank, block buffs, or the ability to take strip buffs back from the enemy. So like a Wukong who can strip them off, or a Michinaki, or somebody like an Ugo that's putting up block buffs. Otherwise, if that block debuffs gets stolen and spread, that's a real pain for a Hydra run where you can't land your debuffs anymore. That can ruin runs. So this is a dangerous skill, but a nice skill for Hydra. But you got to have a team built around that. That makes that work. The passive is okay in that she could stop somebody from dying. So on a progressing team that has risk, that's probably helpful. I think for developed teams, that's okay because you're generally not dying, or you have revivers if you think you're going to die. So I don't think the passive is that great for Hydra. It doesn't hurt, but it's not great. So verdict on her for Hydra. I think she brings some valuable debuffs. She brings great healing, protection, a revive. So if you can protect those buffs from getting stolen, so you could even put her in protection set, but if you could get those buffs from being stolen, I think she's pretty usable. Where it is unfortunate, again, she only has one single target attack. So she's not doing anything with these other 2 skills. So you can't use provoke sets or curse sets on her, which make Hydra champs more valuable. So that does take away her value in Hydra versus some other champs. For those reasons, I view her as a progression Hydra champ. I don't view her as late to endgame Hydra because you're going to have too many other Hydra champs you can use. But I think she is a very solid progression Hydra champ. Outside that, then the next place I'd go is Arena. She's got 100% chance to sleep on the A1, which is a cool Arena skill. If they don't have Stone Skin, if you're going first so you can sleep their turn meter booster potentially. Otherwise, Stone Skin, cleanse, block debuffs, I'll take that out. But she does have an A1. The passive also can block somebody from getting killed on a random basis on the first hit. So single target, single hit enemies she's good against. I mean, that is limiting. So can't use that in live arena. Can't use that. So it's really 3v3 in classic where you see single target, single hit attackers where that can come in handy. The other debuffs where you've got decreased speed, decreased speed's helpful, block debuffs, revive on death. Those are good skills. I don't see that as late to end game Arena. She's a progression Arena champ and a useful one at that. She's a progression Hydra champ. So I do view her as a very good progression champ overall. Unfortunate though, because she's a Void Legendary. I still think Void Legendary should be useful throughout the game for all levels of people because they're Void Legendaries. You may not pull them for 200 and some shards. And I don't see her at that level. So I still think I'd be disappointed if I pulled her, even with the buffs, and I am late to endgame. I think if I got her early, I'd still be disappointed because I could have got Sify, Marichka, Taras, Cardial, all those other Voyage legendaries. But she's at least usable and probably worth the books for a progression champ. So late to endgame, I don't know that she leaves the vault. There's some fun teams you could use, but there's fun double Chagor teams in Sand Devil, so she could fit into something like that. But I feel like those are fun teams to build. I have a team that's never lost, and why would I spend the investment in her? So anyway, that's Claydna. The next one was Hakorn, and I will go quickly through him. I don't have Hakorn. Short story is they're making this a 3-turn duration, and he now can do a full cleanse and block debuffs with a heal on a 3-turn cooldown. That's a really nice skill. And then they've changed his A3 to be a based on damage shield he can build with 20% of the damage. So for him, that's kind of a shame. I really wish they had just done this where it ignored defense. Somehow buff it without changing the nature of the skill. Because the 25% HP made him, he just didn't do enough damage. But if you could have made it ignore defense or something like that, then you could up the damage. But with the way they changed it to it, now you got to put crit cap and crit damage on him to make him a nuker. He doesn't have additional damage with a second hit or a buff space, something that makes the nukers in this game like Magnar even or Taras do a lot more damage. Narcissus, they all have extra abilities. He doesn't have any of this in this skill, so I don't think they're going to give him multipliers that make him hit hard. So I think he's going to build an average shield, and you're going to have to put stronger gear on him. So you can't make him as tanky as you would have. So I fear his A3 is just going to be and he's harder to build. The A2, that's still a nice skill, and it doesn't take any books. So the fact that this is a debuff cleanse with the block debuffs with no books on a legendary does put him for people who are progressing into Nether Spider, Shogun's Grove on the Narahorn teams. You've got a champ that can cleanse with no books. Well, Reliquary Tender, the rare, can fit on that team, though. So let's keep it in perspective. He's legendary, and I'm saying he can do what a rare can do. But he can at least do it. And Clan Boss. So you can have him be your blocker of the affinity in particular debuffs from the Clan Boss. So he's got a few places that he can use this skill without having to spend legendary books, which make him at least cheaper, more viable in that perspective. So I view him not quite the Pixneal buff because this skill actually is pretty usable, but it's definitely not even the Teal or Claydna buff level. You know, I think they improved him. They made this skill quite valuable, but he's a legendary to get one good skill. That's so disappointing Hakorn buff, I would say. By the way, he's in PvE, so you'll see him in the Doom Tower, and he's going to be doing a 3-turn cleanse with block debuffs. So Doom Tower got a little more difficult, so you're going to have to make sure you control him before he screws up the run. And then compare him to an epic like Miscreated Monster, by the way. Miscreated Monster does a 3-turn shield on a 3-turn cooldown, and he's got an AoE stun. So in Scarab, I'd rather take the epic in than the legendary because he's going to have a turn off. So even versus an epic, he's not as good in the one skill that he does bring. Anyway, that's Hakorn. So hopefully that perspective was valuable of, how did I see these champs fitting in my roster? If I got Hakorn, he's going to stay in the vault for me. I'm not progressing. If I Claydna, she's going to stay in the vault for me, I'm pretty sure, unless I see something cool come out. And I think if I pulled her as progression champ, I could use her, but that's probably it. So that's my view. I would love any comments you have on reactions. Do you disagree or agree with anything I said? And if you can subscribe if you found this content valuable or like the video, I definitely would appreciate that as I'm trying to build the channel. Thank you.